Not long to go now before the action kicks off again in Game Week 31, so I'll be here for a relatively quick episode going through some of the key names to consider on the waivers this week. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast, website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another Game Week preview going over waiver options, hidden gems and some general Premier League chat ahead of Game Week 31. Now, we have less than 24 hours to go before the Game Week 31 waiver deadline, with games spread across Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evening this week, which then rolls straight into Game Week 32 on Saturday. So it's then a Friday morning waiver deadline. So a very busy week for draft managers. Now, I'm not going to waste too much time in this one. It's going to be a relatively quick and to the point one because I don't have a lot of time to make this and you don't have a lot of time to listen to this either. So I'm recording this episode on Sunday the 31st of March. So any team news, injury developments or press conference info are up to date as of now, which isn't a lot of info and of course subject to change. Some of the players I'll be discussing in this episode include Harvey Barnes, Brennan Johnson, Jean-Philippe Mateta, plus a few more, so let's get straight into it. So let's kick things off quickly with Waiver Watch, and I'm going to change Waiver Watch moving forward now just to be including the top 100 leagues, which is a new feature I've mentioned on recent episodes. So what this feature is doing is just honing in on the top 100 scoring leagues for that particular league size and just looking at who they're bringing in and out. So it's just looking at those top 100 leagues. And to be honest, so far, what the big leagues are doing seems to be matching what the rest of the leagues are doing too. So there isn't too much discrepancy there. The main players that were coming in were Ben Chilwell, Diogo Jota, Gallagher, McAllister, Jamal Lascelles and Dizazi. The players leaving were Roslov, Reguilon, Collins, Aya, so all of the Brentford defenders, and also Pedro Neto for Wolves was making way in quite a lot of leagues. Now, with regards to the fixtures, I'm not going to dwell too long on these. I will quickly mention again the Game Week 34 doubles. I know they'll be on most of your radars. Nobody will be paying much attention probably to it in tomorrow's waivers. But as soon as that processes and as soon as we start moving into Game Week 32, all of those Game Week 34 doublers will start to show up on the transactions tab when you look at the three upcoming fixtures or the three upcoming game weeks next to any particular player, which means that your more casual or less engaged managers in your draft league will start to hone in that there is a player there with a double game week coming up. So just to bear that in mind, this is probably the last game week you'll be able to get someone in fully off the radar. And as I said, the other managers could well be on the scent of the player that you've got your eyes on. So just bear that in mind. In terms of this week and next, I guess, Bournemouth, I think, are worth highlighting. And we're all pretty familiar with their players, given the last month or so. We've had lots of them in and out. They've got a home game against Palace and then go away to Luton. Pretty much all of them have been thrown back onto the waiver pile in recent weeks. So keep an eye on my predicted lineup because that will really dictate the options that I think is worth considering. One thing I will say is that I will very likely be predicting a midweek start for my old mate Dango Ouattara. So there is one name I could throw out at this point. Liverpool at home to Sheffield United in midweek, the kind of game where you're happy to have any of their starters. The only thing is it will be a little bit tricky to predict their lineup. I expect a few changes could affect the defence, midfield and forward line. So again, maybe keep an eye on my predicted lineup as to who I think will start. Newcastle have Everton at home, Fulham away in the next two, and there are a few Geordies mentioned in this episode, so I won't dwell on those. Wolves, Burnley away, West Ham at home in their next two. Could be some options there for you. But yeah, otherwise, I think the fixtures are pretty much self-explanatory. Some key injuries then. The biggest one is Jamal Lascelles, who goes, his name gets added to the ACL list. Probably doesn't factor much into draft planning in terms of replacements, as I think I certainly will be avoiding a Newcastle defence moving forward. Attack is a different kettle of fish, and as I said, I've got a few to mention in this episode. But yeah, are we really going to be looking at Emil Kraft? Probably not. The only thing really is a lot of you and a lot of us brought Lascelles in last week, so it does book in another waiver that we maybe weren't intending to do. Cash is out for a few weeks for Villa. Again, probably doesn't affect too many of you. And the only other one to keep an eye on is Areola going off at half-time injured for West Ham. So if you've got Areola, just make sure that you will have a playing goalkeeper in midweek. So could bring Fabianski into the fold. Into the main picks then, starting with Harvey Barnes. Yeah, a bit of a bandwagon, I guess, to chat about Harvey Barnes, and given what he did yesterday. But there isn't much time left this season, so we need to wring out every drop we can from any bandwagon going. So, yeah, Newcastle at the back, I'm not interested in. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in defenders full stop at the moment. If I could play 7 mids and 3 attackers with a goalkeeper, I would. In terms of who Newcastle will play in midweek, Isak by default pretty much has to continue up top. Wilson's injured. Almiron is injured and rubbish. Gordon is now banned for the next game, picking up 2 yellow cards. So I don't think the lineup up top should be too difficult to predict. I'm guessing it's going to be Murphy, Isak, and Harvey Barnes in that front 3. So if any of them are available, very worth a waiver this week. Next is Brennan Johnson, who I have to say I've had in my main draft squad almost apologetically for the last month or so. I brought him in because there wasn't really anyone better to bring in for whoever it was I replaced him, who I replaced in my team at the time. I kept watching him put in, to my eyes anyway, pretty frustrating performances for Spurs, yet always seeming to come away with attacking returns. So he was kind of fairly popular in terms of waivers, and his ownership's gradually crept up. There's been a lot of chat about him in the draft forums, and I think that's mainly from draft players who don't watch Spurs as much as I do, who just see a player who's consistently getting a goal or assist, even if he comes on as a substitute. The positive thing lately has been that the performances have definitely caught up with the output. His performances have been much, much better, and as I say, the attacking returns have continued too. 4 goals and 9 assists for the season now, which I think if you'd offered anyone when he signed would have been delighted with. 10 returns in his last 12 appearances, with a few of those coming off the bench. So I think barring any training ground injuries or anything else that we can't really plan for, I think he's virtually certain to start the game away at West Ham in midweek. I expect Kulusevski will get a benching. He's probably overdue a bit of a rest. He himself is an interesting one, just while I'm on the subject. He's got 9 returns for the season now, has an expected goal involvement according to FPL of 9.0, so he's bang on the money in terms of what you'd be expecting him to do based on his performances. But I can already foresee his name cropping up in my DMs on draft forums about whether he needs to be dropped, particularly given I expect him to be benched in midweek, so I think that will put a lot of managers off considering how quiet he's been lately. All I would say is it's certainly not the worst time to trade him away if you're able to find somebody that was interested in it. Another name in midfield again is Dwight McNeil. Now, despite Everton's overall poor form, he himself has continued putting in his very typical steady Eddie performances, clocking up some decent underlying expected stats in the process. An assist for Beto's goal on Saturday. He's one to have penciled in your waivers if you're having a bit of a clear out. He's maybe not your first choice or even your second choice, but a dependable option you'd be happy to root for if he did end up in your team, and could well be better than your current 5th mid. And then finally, from the main section, Jean-Philippe Mateta for Crystal Palace. I think out of all the Palace assets, Mateta could be the easiest to pick up early with half an eye on their Gameweek 34 double. Starting strikers are never bad to pick up. They have an okay fixture away at Bournemouth on Tuesday. Ownership in 8-team leagues, just 25%. So for the majority of 8-team leagues, he will be available. That does rise drastically in 10-team leagues. His ownership is 82% in those, so not as readily available. He's now scored 3 goals since Glasner took over, so I don't think there's any debating his starting place. I'm still interested to see how the Palace starting lineup shakes up once Elise is fully fit too. That won't affect Mateta's playing time, of course. 6 goals now for the season for Mateta, and I've got a sneaky suspicion it's probably 50-50. He could push into double digits for the first time in a Premier League campaign. Into hidden gems now, so these are all guys with generally less than 10% ownership. Now, the first one I will caveat and say player mentions are not always an endorsement, so don't just hear the player name and assume Draft FC is saying I should bring them in. I'm going to talk about Brereton Diaz here. obviously coming off the back of a massive haul, 18-point haul, and he will be sticking out on the waiver pile. And now I know there'll be lots of you eyeing him up on the waiver pile. There's definitely going to be someone in your league WhatsApp group this week who was chatting about how they were just about to bring him in before they got distracted. But Sheffield United remain pretty crap. They're away to Anfield next. Then they've got Chelsea in what is generally a very rough run-in from here on out. A couple of home games sprinkled in against Burnley and Forest, but even if they win those, they're down. I think larger leagues probably should be keen. I think if you're in a 16-team league, for example, in those he's only rostered in 28%, so by all means pick him up in those leagues. He's going to start. He's starting to assume a bit of a talisman cult-like persona there, which I guess gives you that sort of added ability that you could just pop up with a return in any game. But I think if you're in a league size of 12 or less, I would happily ignore him and let one of the other managers grab him. To Newcastle again, another friend of the pod, Jacob Murphy. He's played about 3 different positions in that last game against West Ham due to everyone else getting injured, which obviously affected his attacking numbers. He basically ended up at right back come the end. As mentioned already, given the state of the squad, I think there's a very, very high chance he starts. The only thing that could get in the way is the next guy I'm about to mention, who is Elliot Anderson, who, again, tends to play more on the left side, either as a left winger or a left-sided number 8, where Willock has played the last few games. I think, as it stands, and what I'll be intending is in my predicted lineups, I will have Anderson predicted to start over Willock in that left-hand side number 8 position, with Barnes in front of him, Murphy on the far right. I guess the only way that could change would be if either Barnes or Anderson came and covered the right wing spot and the other one was left wing, leaving Willock in midfield, but I don't think that's quite as likely. Lots of chat as well about how unlucky Newcastle have been with injuries, but for most of the season, Howe has been so reluctant to rotate players. It's been one of the easiest, particularly early on before the injuries really set in, generally one of the easiest starting 11s to predict, and there have been times where I've predicted a little bit of rotation in the squad, and it just hasn't come. So I just think it's that's finally catching up with them, and they maybe need to learn a lesson there. But yeah, so I think, well, I guess off the top of my head now, Bruno Guimaraes, Longstaff, and Anderson in midfield, Barnes, Isak, Murphy across the front 3. At the back, it'd be Dubravka again, probably Trippier back in if he's fit, Kraft, then Shah, and then left back, likely Dan Burn again, because it sounds like Livramento's injured. The only other one that could get in is Lewis Hall, who, yeah, again, I'll see how I feel Monday morning. I might put him in the predicted lineup, depends how much I expect them to rotate. But as I said, Newcastle notoriously this year haven't rotated much at all. The reason Lewis Hall's quite a good segue is because he was on my shortlist for a most hidden gem pick. I'm not going with him because I'm not convinced enough that he's going to start. The other player I was looking at was Vitinho, who was the most hidden gem pick the week before last. Obviously, Quansah was the one the week just gone who did start, which was nice, but obviously clean sheet disappeared within about 2 minutes. Vitinho was the one I was looking at from the week before, who got us an assist and a 5-pointer in a very abysmal game week overall. And I was thinking, do I go back to him? Burnley don't have too bad a fixture this week at home to Wolves, but I'm going to go with Badiashile for Chelsea. Now, I was annoyed at myself for bottling Badiashile in the predicted lineups. Anyone that checked on them earlier in the week would have seen that I had him in there, and then I changed him for Thiago Silva, I think on Thursday, Friday time. And I guess what we've learned is that Thiago Silva really has no value to Pochettino anymore. Given the injuries, will he give him a run out on Thursday night? I'm leaning towards no again. DRAFTFC Kieran, who some of you will be familiar with from previous episodes, who is a Chelsea fan, isn't expecting much change to the starting lineup, barring any necessary tweaks due to injuries, the main question mark being over Melo Gusto at right back. I think I agree. I think there may be one other change up top. I'm probably going to predict Sterling to come back into the 11 over Mudryk, but we'll have to wait and see. Annoyingly, I don't think we'll have much in the way of firm news before the deadline, so this could be a risky one. But I think if you're in, larger leagues, probably 11 or 12 plus, I think Badiashile has to be a pickup for somebody, and just make sure that you've got someone on your bench if he doesn't play. So that is it for this episode. A quick reminder, the waiver deadline is Monday, 1st of April at 6 o'clock UK time. So probably by the time you're listening to this, that will be very close, or could have even passed by, and you're listening to this trying to look at some free agents because you forgot. So don't be the one that forgets. If you're listening to this and it is before 6, literally take your phone out your pocket now and put some of those waivers in that you need to, because you'll forget otherwise. You'll be on your way home from work, you'll be on the train, there'll be no signal, you'll forget, it'll be too late, and some of your other managers will get a leg up on you. So don't let this be a little silly mistake that costs you a valuable 3 points, or cost you a valuable player pickup for the run-in for any of the leagues. Really, this is one of the best ways to stay ahead in draft, is being on the ball. So just pencil some of those moves in now if you have to. If this is your first time listening to the pod, make sure you are following on whichever platform you listen to so you don't miss out on any others as they drop. If this is your first time watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate it. It'll keep you informed of any new videos when they come out, and it'll also help get the pod out there to the wider YouTube audience for people who are interested in draft who may not otherwise find our stuff. Of course, I would urge all of you to head over to draftfc.co.uk and check out what we have on offer there for official FPL draft leagues. If you've never signed up before, you can get a 1-month free trial using the code DRAFTFCPOD, all capitalised and one word, flashing up across the screen now if you're watching. It's also written in the description below if you're listening to the podcast, so that'll give you a 1-month free trial so you can have a full look around and decide if it's something of interest to you as we near Gameweek 38. The one thing I'll mention again, and I did mention last time, is that if you are signed up come Gameweek 38, you will be able to take advantage of the draft history feature, which will save all of your league data from this season, 23-24, as a little time capsule so that you'll have that to look back on forever, so long as you stay a signed-up member at DraftFC. And say it doesn't matter that you haven't been signed up since Gameweek 1, as long as you're in come Gameweek 38, we'll be able to save the whole season worth of data for you to keep forever. So best of luck for the upcoming game week. Don't forget the waivers, and as always, stay shook.